What is up, Earthnoids and Spacenoids? I am just a simple new type, and in this episode, we are returning to the world of Johnny Ridden and UC-0090. Last time, the FSS team learned about Minaret and Jacobius. Johnny captured Uma Lightning and got him medical attention. Also, Minaret isn't at Jaburo, but rather the Sangre Azul, a piece of the puzzle that will get them to Minaret. This time, Gopp will acquire the help of Yazan to escort Ingrid Zero. We deep dive into the different type of cyber-newtypes, and Led and Remia break out Uma Lightning. So let's get into this. Remia and Led are going over the data they have on Uma Lightning with the doctor. Based off of his age, he may be one of the first generations to undergo cyber-newtype enhancements. The doctor believes that he is one of the first because he only went through physical enhancements, and no psychological enhancements like seen in modern-day cyber-newtypes. Essentially, early cyber-newtypes were kids that were forced to roid out and grow into adult bodies. Think of a child athlete that overtrains at a young age. Like a young gymnast, their bodies are greatly tuned for gymnastics, but are stunted in other areas. Now force a child to take steroids and throw them into the battlefield. You are fundamentally creating a child who can only function in war. These early cyber-newtypes are closer to super soldiers than what we would consider new types, and the term cyber-newtype didn't even exist when Uma went through enhancements. It is only when new type theory started getting popular and people like Amado started showing up. Now, modern-day cyber-newtypes are simply reverse engineering new types, which involve training at a young age and growing the mind along with the body. But even so, it is still reverse engineering biology, and there is no biological free lunch. New types evolved to handle these states of being, but a cyber-new type had to be enhanced to get to that state. Like someone on steroids, you typically have to be constantly taking these enhancements to keep the edge off. And we see that. Former Asame gets headaches and begins panicking without whatever drug Namikar gives her. Cyber-newtypes seem to reach a breaking point. Much of the data on cyber-newtypes are still classified, so they are shooting in the dark when it comes to why humans would treat other humans like this. But that is what war does to people. They do have data on Xion's studies on new types and cyber-newtypes. They once tried everyone. Kids, elderly, men, women, everything in between. Of course, the growing mind is the most optimal. However, Xion focused on enhancing fortitude, having a stoic and unwavering demeanor when faced with chaos. The Federation, however, focused on human psyche, finding people's breaking points. What is interesting that we learn here is that Neo-Xion cyber-newtypes are closer to Federation cyber-newtypes than original Xion cyber-newtypes. The doctor says all this to let Led know that Uma most likely comes from the old school days of cyber-newtype enhancements, before the term new type was known to the common man. Before leaving, the doctor suggests that there may be some infantilism in the older new types, but is unsure. Remia is sad about what will happen to Uma after they eventually hand him over to EFF. He violated treaties and is a cyber-newtype, so it isn't looking good for him, and he will most likely get dissected like a lab rat. She tells Led that he once said that not everything born out of this war is a monster. Led says he will try to figure something out, but he isn't a miracle worker. Meanwhile, Oxner gives Jacobius some amphibious mobile suits to use. Jacobius looks up at a Ram Zagok. We just talked about this unit in our War in the Pocket manga coverage. Go check that out. During the war, the Principality of Xion planned to gain sea superiority and invested in many amphibious mobile suits. However, EFF went a different direction. Rather than take out Xion little by little, they used starvation tactics. Since half the population went away during the 1-week war, resources were barren. They focused much of what little resources they had on recovering Odessa, which was Xion's greatest supply source for their ground forces. Once they had Odessa, they instantly focused on space, cutting off supply lines heading back to Side 3. This allowed ground forces to play a war of attrition, slowly weeding out the remaining Xion forces. This worked, but what this manga doesn't bring up is the fact that this allowed Xion remnants to hold out all the way up to UC-0085, and it could be argued the cause for the rise in the Titans, possibly a bigger threat. The strategy by EFF didn't account for focusing the resources on the oceans. Near the end of the war, Xion even focused their attention away from the seas and more on space. Post-war, EFF did what they did best, used the amphibious mobile suits for their own needs. At an unknown location, Ingrid Zero and Vasuki, aka Yazan Gable, land in an aircraft. Ingrid refers to Yazan as Uncle Snake. Out in space, the Wayline Squadron and Jim Sniper Customs are meeting with the Shamshir Squad. The commander got a hold of a Xion beam rifle. That is when they get attacked by a damaged Galgoog. He IDs the unit and realizes that it is the Crimson Lightning. He takes out his unit one by one until the commander is the only one left. He is able to shoot and take out the Galgoog. He heads to the cockpit to find Johnny Ridden bleeding out. This commander is the FSS president, who Hoover. In the present, he is looking up at the same Gelgoog. He meets with Led Wayline. In the Gopp Nature Park, Gopp and Ingrid Zero go for a horse carriage ride. This fat ass got a hiking trail named after him, and rather than hike, he uses a horse? God damn the irony. It turns out that Gopp's family has been tending to this park since the old century. His family helped keep the area public lands, and no corporation can build on top of it. Yazan is escorting Ingrid, but Gopp wants him to help on a big mission. He reminds him that he is nothing more than a pilot. He knows that he is Yazan Gable. He is shocked that he knows his past, but he still insists on being called Vasuki. Remember, Gopp wasn't a front man during the war. He was in Jaburo handling the politics and financiers. Logistics and supply chains is the value he provided during the 1-year war, and because of him, Operation V came to be. We saw a little bit of this in our coverage of Gundam The Origin, where Gopp played a bigger role. Such lowly officers like himself didn't have to lower their standards during the 1-year war. If you are following in our coverage of Gundam Katana, we have seen some EFF squads become desperate and resort to selling drugs or stealing. It seems Gopp prevented his particular squad during the 1-year war from having to resort to that. Yazan is grateful? Huh, what a complex psychopath. That being said, he wants Gopp to get to the point. The history books will say that EFF won the war, but Gopp believes that it was the Spacenoids. Earth has become an empty shell of what it was. It is merely a symbol. This is where Haman Khan failed. She should have tried to conquer Spacenoids instead of ruling over Earth. Earth's days are numbered. More and more companies are moving production off Earth. Earth now relies more on Spacenoids, more so than the opposite. This is exactly what Full Frontal tells the world in a few years later in UC 0096. Furthermore, Gopp says that Zeon, for all intents and purposes, acquired their independence. After the war, they returned to a republic and took on enormous amounts of debt. As a republic, EFF was supposed to take on their debt, but at the time, this would bankrupt them, so they never merged Zeon. But that is when Zeon did something EFF didn't expect. They tried to sell off all its military assets to a private company, mainly Anaheim Electronics. Zeonic, MIP, Zimad, all these could be swallowed up by one corporation and hold the monopoly. So EFF did what government does best. They intervened. This split up Zeon's military assets. Half went to the Federation, and half went to Anaheim Electronics. We learned earlier also that splitting up the assets split up the piece of the puzzle. You need both pieces to solve it. Gopp recognizes that he is a bureaucratic parasite, but he notes that a parasite needs a host. The host is on the verge of death, and he believes the thing that will upset the balance of power is Minaret. Before taking his leave, Gopp asks Yazan what Patimus Sirocco was like. He just says that he was an interesting person. Yazan makes his leave. Led and Hoover are in the FSS archives. He wants to investigate Jaburo, but Hoover says it is out of the question. The official reason is because of the nuclear explosion during Zeta, but in reality, most of the base is intact. The official reason is that it is someone else's turf, and whoever these people are, they want it to decay in silence. Hoover suggests that Led just settle down and live life quietly already. Scott informs Remy about his data on the core fighter that was recovered. He shows her the serial number before they ran maintenance before the mission, and the serial number of the core fighter after it was recovered. It is a different serial number. Someone switched out the unit. That is when Led and Bob sit next to her. Led wants to sneak into Jaburo. Jacobius notes that there is a Garuda class nearby. They go to Battle Station 1. On the Garuda, Yazan's new team members are testing out the Gap plant. He reminds his team that they are running training exercises while doing recon on the outer edge of Jaburo. Led tells Remia and Bob about his run-in with little Johnny Ridden while on the island. All he knows is that she wanted him to go to Jaburo. They don't know how they are going to pull off breaking into Jaburo, but that is when Scott has a plan. Later that night, they deactivate the security cameras and break out Uma Lightning. Bob and Aishwarya bring a car and they take Uma away. Uma says, "Hey Johnny, where are we going? Are you in trouble, Johnny? Hey Johnny, what is happening?" Led says, "Shut up, I'm not Johnny." He realizes that they are going to South America and tells him that he could call in friends. Scott tells Hoover about the incident, claiming that Led and Remia are chasing the people who broke out Uma Lightning. Hoover says, "Yeah, sure, so you needed the FSS elite hacker and Bob as well, I see. Scott just says it is a precaution. Hoover is fed up with this, but he will pretend to play along with whatever Led is up to. Jacobius and his team just monitor Yazan's team. His transformable mobile suits are gas guzzlers, so they will let them waste their gas and not give away their location. They are hiding somewhere underground. Yazan notes a bombing run recently and inspects the area and does another bombing run. He seems to know that they are somewhere nearby. Meanwhile, Cristobal and Emma are heading to Dakar pretending to be a newlywed couple. Led and the gang are waiting at an abandoned port when out of the water emerges a Yukon-class sub. With this, they will be able to get to South America no problem. And that will do it for this episode. It has been a while since we covered Johnny Ridden, and it is nice and refreshing to see a writer integrate the past few decades of Universal Century into a really engaging story. We also are starting to learn Led's past and his relationship with Hoover. Next time, the gang will take a boat ride. Also, Ingrid Zero gets herself her own Gundam, and PMC Themis, representing Oxner, and Yazan, representing Gopp, finally clash. But that will do it for now, new types. Remember that most cyber-newtypes can't exist outside of war. Poor fellas, except for Gune. Peace.